Salute. How y'all doing? My name is DerrickCWilliams. Shout out and respect due to my newest subscribers. Amino Rosa, M. Jane Kitchen, Delisha, That Tick Gal, Eurasian Vlogs, Daisy Ray, Global Deborah, JC45, Steffi's Life, Flo J Creativity TV, Jinky Aisha Vlogs, Official Oli TV, and last but certainly not least, Leila Fayon. Typically, I don't make long videos, no more than, say, 10 minutes max. But I thought this would be very instructive for YouTube and for people who are subscribed to me on YouTube. The title of this presentation will be called You'll Be Sorry. And I'm just one man in the comment section on YouTube. As you all know, everyone has just been buying up all the toilet paper. Never mind storable food, never mind precious metals, never mind cryptocurrency, never mind, you name it, never mind water, never mind a good quality medical kit or 2 or 3. None of this stuff, just toilet paper. And that's really all you need to know about the American mindset. Well, like the presentation you're about to see, a reset of America and its mindset is forthcoming. I'm going to step aside and I'm going to let you see some stuff that I have been thinking about throughout most of the 90s and the better part of the 2000s. For myself, I've instructed my daughter, who's 15. She's well aware of some of these things as well. Storable food, I have a little bit. Precious metals, cryptocurrency, firearms. Because what it is that preppers are always put down and denigrated. And I was always the type that I listen to everyone. I will hear you out. And a lot of what preppers said had the ring of truth to me. They made sense. And so I employ some of those strategies. Many of my family members do not. They laugh. Heaven help them. And many of you all will laugh. And heaven help you all too. All y'all take care. Greenville, Mississippi till I die.
To all those who mocked preppers, your day of reckoning has arrived. This is Mike Adams here. I'm known as the Health Ranger. I'm the publisher of Pandemic.news and Survival.news, Guns.news, and really hundreds of other websites. I've been an independent publisher for 20 years, and this entire time I've been very open and very public about preparing for the collapse of society. And now, on the verge of this global pandemic exploding across every city in the United States and potentially leading to millions of infections in the U.S., according to certain models, which are now even being studied by the Department of Defense, we've now arrived at this moment where those who did not prepare are just about to explode with panic. For all these years, it's been, I guess, fun for non-preppers to mock people who plan ahead. People like myself and millions of others who stored extra food. In fact, I run a massive international food manufacturing facility. It's called healthrangerstore.com, and we buy food by the tens of tons. I'm also a food scientist, published scientist. I run an ISO-accredited analytical laboratory specializing in heavy metals and pesticide analysis. It's a multi-million-dollar laboratory facility. I'm the science director and the founder of it. I'm the author of a book called Food Forensics. I know more about food contamination than most people living today. Not all of them, but most. And just to give you a little more of my resume, to qualify myself for what I'm about to say here, I've undergone extensive combat training, firearms training, shooting, tactical engagements, and I've also trained police officers in Arizona and soldiers who are about to go overseas in edge weapons defense as well. Bottom line is, I'm a prepper, expert in terms of deploying weapon systems, and yet I don't feel like I'm prepared enough for this coronavirus pandemic. And it's been fun, I think, for a lot of people out there to mock preppers. National Geographic even did a whole series on it called Doomsday Preppers. Mostly the show was all about depicting preppers as lunatics who live in shipping containers and have canned food and stockpiles of ammunition and biological warfare suits. Well, guess what? In the context of what we're seeing right now with this pandemic, Those doomsday preppers now look like geniuses because they're prepared and most people are not. They've got food and ammo. They're living off grid. They've got solar panels and rainwater collection. They grow their own herbs and in some cases their own food in their own home gardens. They're away from the cities, just as we see the cities are going to be where the pandemic is. They are self-reliant in a time when the average American depends entirely on the next paycheck just to survive, when the average American depends on FEMA to save them because they've lost any sense of self-reliance or redundant backup supplies. The average American can no longer survive away from the system. They've become part of the system. They've become dependent on that system, and that system is about to fail. I see it as we are ordering commercial quantities of food and other supplies for our own online retail operations. The supply lines are collapsing. The average American has not yet come to terms because they don't know where things come from. They don't know how things are made. Non-preppers, or people who mock preppers, have a false idea about the world. They think the world is redundant, when in fact the world is prone to failure. It has been structured this way for a very long time, which is why many of us have been preppers for such a long period of time, because we could see this was coming. The global banking system is about to come tumbling down. JP Morgan just alerted its employees that they're going to have to work from home. And that's the investment side of the company, not retail banking, but you can imagine what's going to happen to the financial sector when everybody's ordered home because isolation is the only way to stop the spread of this pandemic. What's going to happen when workers are not allowed to show up at the water treatment plants, or the grocery stores, or the coal-fired power plants, or the fuel refineries, or law enforcement, first responders? What's going to happen when those first responders get infected because they are among the first and there are already 27 firefighters under quarantine in Washington state? Responders get infected, some will die, most will live, but they'll have to live under quarantines that could last many weeks. And if they come back to work, they might have a reinfection because this zombie virus, this coronavirus, comes back even after you've been cleared. So you'll have a resurgence in infections in some individuals after they've been cleared to return to work, and they will reinfect the other police officers or the other National Guard troops or the other military soldiers who share enclosed spaces. And in fact, speaking of enclosed spaces, it's not just submarines and military barracks, it's also nursing homes and schools and malls and corporate offices. It's airplanes and buses and trains and subways. It's public transportation. It's your Uber vehicle. It's a shared space. At a time when the coronavirus can spread through the air and can survive on surfaces for up to 9 days and remain viable and infectious. Shared vessels include elevators and subway handrails and doors to corporate offices. And the list goes on and on. This coronavirus, if it were easy to contain, it would have been contained already in Wuhan, China. We were told, don't worry, this will stop in China. It won't affect us in the United States. You have nothing to worry about. It won't get to Europe, it won't get to Canada, it won't get to Australia. Well, guess what happened? Just as I predicted, just as I warned. It spread to all the major cities of China, and then it spread to Asia. It infected South Korea, it infected Japan, and Singapore, and Thailand, and Taiwan, and Malaysia, Hong Kong. It's in India, it's in Egypt, it's in Iran, it's exploding all over Iran, and it's in sub-Saharan Africa, which should give any about culture and geography significant cause for alarm. This entire time, you have been lied to by the WHO. You've been lied to by the CDC. You've been lied to by the mainstream media. You've been lied to by the tech giants and their censorship brigade that very quickly shut off all real discussion about this pandemic. The only voices that have told you the truth are voices like mine. Independent media, lifelong preppers, real patriotic Americans, Christians who value life, who want to protect your life, or at least teach you how to protect yourself. And I have not even dared talk publicly about where this goes because the numbers would cause most people to panic. So I've been downplaying it. Everything I've said is a best case scenario, because the worst case scenario is not just a 2% death rate across America. The worst case scenario is the collapse of complex societies. The collapse of complex societies can only be understood when you dig into the structure and the fragile nature of current advanced societies that depend on complex supply lines and expertise specialization. Complex societies are highly vulnerable to collapse because they lack redundancies and the simple grassroots kind of skill set that used to exist primarily when we were an agrarian society and still exists today in some less developed nations such as Papua New Guinea, which will probably weather this pandemic just fine. But complex societies depend on maximizing efficiencies through non-redundant single-source supply chains and centralization of resources to maximize efficiencies through economies of scale. So we have achieved the best price in society, single-source supply lines, and in doing so, we have made ourselves vulnerable to a collapse of those supply lines, and that's exactly what we are about to experience in a way that most people have never even begun to imagine. And it is informed people who now stand to survive this. Those who mocked preppers are about to face a day of reckoning. Those people will one day soon discover that they have no food, they have no medicine, they have no antiviral herbs, they don't know how to grow their own medicine, they don't know how to make hand sanitizer, they don't know how to make colloidal silver, which is the world. I don't mean to sound condescending, although sometimes I come across that way. It's just that I consider these basic adult skills. I think every adult should know how to grow food, how to make medicine, how to treat a wound, how to repair a firearm, how to reload a firearm. Every adult should know how to do math, should know the basics of science, of infectious disease, history, medicine, culture. And yet we live in a time when our culture now teaches our youth how to be specialists in victimhood and transgenderism, progressivism, virtue signaling, and other similar nonsense that has zero application to reality because it's rooted in delusion. So those people who are experts in transgenderism, how will they deal with it? They will say to themselves when they get infected, oh, I now self-identify as a person who's not infected, because they think that wishing has control over biology. This is what they've been taught in their schools and universities, that a man can become a woman and literally transform into a woman by wishing. This will not work with the virus. The virus has no patience for your delusions. The virus is not virtue signaling. It's feeding, and it will eat progressives from the inside out, just like it will eat conservatives. It will eat anyone who denies its existence and who fails to. Those who are wise are preparing now using herbs and natural medicine, colloidal silver, spirulina, licorice root, growing their own antiviral herbs, loading up on turmeric, garlic, ginger, onions with quercetin, glycyrrhizin from licorice root. I mentioned that's a very powerful antiviral molecule that also protects liver function, protects your liver from acetaminophen damage, which is Tylenol, over-the-counter painkiller that causes permanent liver damage. And so preppers know these things, and that lack of knowledge has consequences. So we have arrived, in conclusion, at a Darwinian where we're about to see an applied example of survival of the fittest. It doesn't mean athletically fit, it means those to the changing circumstances of a demanding environment in which not every organism will survive. And who is the most fit in this time as we face a global pandemic that will spread to every city in America, that will cause medical martial law, that will result in quarantine, isolation, food shortages, fuel shortages, medicine shortages, and everything else that you can imagine? Who will survive this? It will not be those who mocked the preppers. The survivors will be the preppers. And the question to you is, are you among them? I realize it hasn't made you a popular person, perhaps, to be intelligent, to be a thinker, to be wise, to understand history, to understand reality. It's not a popular these days. Popular. What's real is sanitizing chemicals that you've stockpiled because you know what's coming, and you know that saving your life may require killing pathogens. What's real is gold bars, gold coins, silver coins, precious metals in your possession, not in some vault somewhere that you won't have access to anyway because there'll be medical martial law. The only thing you own is the thing you can touch, the things you can control. That's what you own. Even the money in your bank account, it's a fictional construct. It can vanish instantly, and it will lose every day, even if it doesn't vanish. As the Federal Reserve is lowering interest rates to create new liquidity, an influx of more free money that dilutes the value of your money. So you're being stolen from right now, whether you realize it or not. And the stock market cannot sustain its current bubble status, which means tens of millions of Americans are about to lose their retirement funds and pensions. All the things they thought were real are just illusion. And so if anything, this coronavirus, it collapses delusion to a brute force reality and then challenges you to survive that reality. And most people aren't ready for the real world because they've lived in a social media or fake news, NPR, Wall Street bubbles and fake finances and easy money. They've lived in a fake world, just living in a city, an artificial construct with artificial inputs that will not function in a quarantine. Have you been living in an artificial world? Because being brutally kicked out of that world is a process that many are not psychologically prepared to survive, much less physically. We are preppers, people who think like I do. We are scientists. Some of us are former military, not myself, but others are former military and firefighters and first-line responders. Are writers and journalists. We are, some of us, school teachers. We are every kind of American that you can imagine. Mothers, fathers. We are people who will survive, even while most others may not. So your best hope, if you're listening to this and you're not yet a prepper, is to get some basic supplies and pray to God that the federal government rescues you because you've bet your life on a system that will fail. And if you do somehow manage to survive this, we will get through this. There will be a lot fewer people living, but humanity will not be made extinct by this. Many of us will survive, and if you survive it, then you can join us in now adding a preparedness to your future survival, and we welcome that. We want more people to be preppers, to be ready for the unexpected. We want massive redundancies to exist across society so that nobody has to panic. And that will be one of the lessons that emerges from this global pandemic apocalypse. I don't know how many people will survive it. I don't know exactly what society will look like, but I have a strong suspicion that this will reset the very structure of human society as it exists today, that nations will fall and nations will transition, and even the United States of America will not be the same 2 years from now as it is right now today.